Good morning, viewers, and welcome once again to the edition of the conversation around brain power in a series of discussions on learning disabilities brought to you courtesy of the Dsylexia Foundation and the Cross River Broadcasting Corporation. In our last conversation, we talked about the meaning of dyslexia. In case you were not here during the conversation, we said that dyslexia is a brain disorder that affects people and makes them unable to read, unable to spell, unable to comprehend, and unable to write. We mentioned some of the signs and symptoms of dyslexia to include things like reversal of letters, inability to pay attention, and attention deficit disorders, lack of concentration and focus, difficulty in being disciplined, difficulty following instructions, difficulty also in reading and understanding. In other words, they have low memory. In this edition this week, we are going to be talking about the causes of dyslexia. I'm sure when we started the conversation last week, some of you would have been wondering, what is the cause of dyslexia? How do one get this kind of disorder? Because we did say that dyslexia is not a disease. It is a learning disorder or learning disability. And because it is not a disease, it does not have a cure. But you learn ways of adaptation in order to grow with that condition and adapt in such a way that you are still able to function properly in society. So what is the cause of dyslexia? The literature did say, and we do know from our practice, people come to the center, and we have traced the causes of dyslexia to two main conditions, two main things. The first one is that dyslexia is caused by a genetic disorder. In other words, dyslexia is inherited genetically. You can inherit it from your parents, either from the mother's side or from your father's side. If any of your parents had had dyslexia in one generation or the other, the chances are you would also produce children who have dyslexia, or you yourself might have become dyslexic. Now, you know the trick with genes is that it may not be your immediate father or your grandfather. It might even be 2 to 3 generations before. So you might not be able to trace it. So I tell people who come to the center wondering about what is the cause of this. I say, let's forget the cause. What can we do about remediation? What can we do to correct it? But let it be known that genetically speaking, one of the causes of dyslexia is that you inherit it from your parents. So it runs in the family. So if a family had one person who is dyslexic on either father or mother's side, the chances are they will pass on that gene to the children. And so when they pass on that gene to the child, and the child grows up and also marries without checking it out, and marries another person who has dyslexia, then they're transmitting dyslexia from generation to generation. So let it be known that one of the causes of dyslexia is genetic. You pass it on from generation to generation. It is generational in origin. The second cause of dyslexia is a traumatic brain injury. When the brain has been traumatically attacked, then those parts of the brain that are responsible for reading, I don't want to go into the technical structures of the brain so that I don't get you confused, but those parts of the brain responsible for reading, for memory, if the brain is attacked traumatically, then those parts of the brain affecting that are responsible for those parts of reading, writing, spelling might be affected. And so you find that people who have been involved in accidents, who have been involved in one form of accident involving head injuries, are most likely to come down with dyslexia over time. So there is a case of a child who was brought to us who was hit by a motorbike when he was 5. While the parents treated the head injury, they didn't realize that he had a brain damage or the brain has been affected. And so that child's dyslexia is caused by that injury. So when the brain has been traumatically attacked or injured, it also results in brain damage that can lead to dyslexia. Which is why I tell teachers, please don't use your cane on the child's head. The more you hit a child's head with the cane, the more likely that you might also be causing traumatic brain injury for that child. I tell parents the same thing. Parents, please stop hitting your children on the head. That anger that you are expressing, don't express it on the child's head with a broom or with a stick or with even a ruler. You can do damage to the rest of the body. While you can do damage to the child's brain when you consistently are beating your child in the head. But that's what we see traditionally in schools, educational institutions, and at home. The easiest place we all parents beat our children is in the head. So I'm advocating that henceforth, please don't beat your child in the head, because you might be causing the child a traumatic brain injury that might lead to dyslexia. So 2 causes of dyslexia are: 1, genetic; the second is traumatic brain injury. And so when you've had any of this, then you are most likely to come down with dyslexia. Now, what are the consequences of dyslexia? Over time, we have noticed that people who are dyslexic are very, very intelligent. I've said that many times. They are of above average intelligence. They are above average intelligence. So they tend to be very oratory. They speak well. The challenge is they can't write well. They can't write at all. That's what the challenge is. So you might be fooled by their oral presentation. So that the consequence of dyslexia runs very far and deep. Let's start from early childhood, for instance. In early childhood, when a child begins to not meet the developmental milestones, especially associated with them in terms of reading, in terms of speech, then the parents often get worried. And this child is more likely to be left behind by the class teacher, is more likely to be punished by the parents in all situations. And because of the continuous punishment of the child, there is a tendency that this child would develop a self-esteem problem. They have developed low self-esteem. We have seen children who refuse now to go to school because their classmates and their teachers have laughed at them for being unable to spell simple words that the rest of the class is spelling, to read certain things that the rest of the class is able to read. Because they are unable to read it, the teacher and the class would laugh at them. And as a result of that, they don't want to go back to that place where they are made fun of. So one of the consequences of dyslexia is that there is a high rate of school dropout among a particular set of people who are dyslexic. So dyslexics are more likely to fall out of school than non-dyslexics because of the twin problem of their inability to read, their inability to write, their inability to comprehend, or even make silly mistakes or not pay attention. Therefore, everyone in class, or including the teacher, tends to laugh at them. There is a very good movie on our website. If you want to go there and see, it's called Enito. It's a very short piece, but it does demonstrate what happens to a child who is dyslexic in class, how the teacher and the students together are mocking and laughing at this child. But today we know that as a result of that laughter, the child might decide never to go to school again and become a dropout. And when children drop out of school, what happens next? They become juvenile delinquents. So the high rate of juvenile delinquency in society, the high rate of crime among teenagers, and the high rate of substance abuse among teenagers can be traced to the fact that most of them are dyslexic. We are doing a study currently to associate those, to make concrete associations between that, and we'll be announcing the result in our October conference. But besides the consequence, we want you to realize, parents to realize that when your child continuously gets mocked by yourself, because parents also join in calling the children names. They call them Olodo, Mumu, all kinds of names parents will call the child. You are gradually pushing that child out of school rather than encouraging the child to be in school. And as a result of that, when the child gets out of school, when it becomes an out-of-school youth, that's why you find them joining cults. So again, we can say that the high rate of cultism amongst students in primary and secondary schools or tertiary institutions can also be traced, or might also be traced, to the situation in which a higher proportion of people are showing signs of dyslexia. And so when they are unable to read and write, and people make fun of them in school, they tend to find avenues to show that they have something to contribute in society. And don't forget, I did say that they are very oratory, they speak well, they dress well, they present themselves well. So people see them and take them to lead those kind of situations, cult situations, gang situations. They are always at the head and the leadership of those gangs because of their persona. So when you see those kind of things, so dyslexia have this kind of consequences in society. It becomes a social problem as more and more children and adults are tending towards cultism and other alcoholic and drug abuse in society. So a study was done in the United States of America, and it was found out that most teenagers who got into prisons at their teenage ages, between 18 and 23, have dyslexia. Most of them have dyslexia. Because when they fell out of school, they had to look for something to make sure their parents recognize that they can make a contribution, either in society or recognized as somebody responsible. So this is one of the consequences that we have seen also beginning to take shape in Nigeria. So dyslexia is one of those things that continuously is a problem. Now, as they become adults, you get into job situations. Remember that I met someone, a 32-year-old woman who graduated from a university and has a degree in architecture. But she came to the center, and when we assessed her, she was dyslexic. And I asked her, Madam, she's 32, but she has a degree. Madam, how did you finish school? Because you can't read, you can't write. She said, well, her husband was supportive and God was gracious, which means she cheated herself through university and other areas. Now, if God was gracious to enable her to cheat, and her husband was supportive to enable her to sort out, as they say, sorting. So these tendencies of sorting, what do they tend to lead to? It leads to the high rate of unemployment in our society. So when you see people who are finished universities are unemployed because they are unemployable, they do not have the necessary skills to be employed. This might be a consequence of dyslexia. So we are crying after the symptoms and not the cause. So what we need to do is to focus on improving the cognitive skills of people who are in school to enable us realize that they can come out of school with skills that enable them to be employed. So unemployment can be traced, unemployment among young people can also be traced to dyslexia, because when they finish school without a skill, it is because they haven't been able to read, they haven't been able to comprehend, they haven't been able to write. So they can't pass any exam, either aptitude test, to even get a pro job. So when they don't get jobs, what do they tend to do? Then they tend to join crimes. That's so. Any wonder why we have so many young people in kidnapping? Any wonder why we have so many young people in the militant areas? Any wonder why we have so many young people in terrorist activities? Maybe we need to trace where this is coming from. And in my view, my considered opinion is that this can be traced or might be traced to their dyslexic situation, because they just needed to have something that they can do to help themselves. Now, when we come to the office situation, there are people also who are dyslexic who are working in offices. In many of them, we had a man who came to us, he's an assistant director in one of the ministries where one of our centers is based, and he said he's the secretary of a departmental board. And the department meets every Monday to review things that they have planned to do. And he's supposed to write the minutes. But because he's dyslexic, he can't write the minutes. So what has he done? He's pretending that he's writing when he's not writing, but he pays a younger person in the office who helps him write up the minutes. And then he presents them on Monday. And when he's presenting the minutes, he will go to the chairman and say, please, sir, if you can take us through the minutes, that would be helpful. He's trying to hide his dyslexic condition. But he's in employment. He's working in an office. In the office, you find these people as well. Now, don't forget, we also mentioned that they have attention deficit disorders. So people who are adult working in offices also have this lack of concentration. They move from office to office talking and gisting. They don't work. They hardly put in as much effort as others who are putting in. They are able to distract themselves from working and distracting others. So at the end of the day, what have we seen? We've seen someone who's had a job, but is not able to perform at the job. And then, if it's a private sector organization, they say, okay, we're going to terminate you because you're not performing. Or they begin to say, oh, their enemies are at work. No enemies at work. It's because of your dyslexic condition. So please do look for a help at the Brain Training Center and at the Dyslexia Foundation, where we can provide you with support to overcome this. So what have we done today? We have tried to discuss first the signs and the symptoms of dyslexia that we started last week. We did mention that if you saw your children or yourself reversing your letters, you are dyslexic. If you are not able to recognize the sequencing of letters or the sequencing of words in a sentence, then you probably are dyslexic. If you are not able to pay attention to detail and hold attention for a longer time, you're probably dyslexic. So when you add up all of these symptoms, do know that you probably are dyslexic, and you do need to have a proper assessment at the Dyslexia Center, which is across the country. And we can give you can look on the scroll bar, you will see our contact details are there. Do feel free to call any of the numbers and make an appointment to call for an assessment. The good thing is that at the moment we are doing free assessments. We are doing free consultations for dyslexia. If you think you are dyslexic, please do come. We'll have a free consultation with you. And then maybe that free consultation might lead you to an assessment. When we do need to do the assessment, then we will take it at that point.